In the previous episode, we discussed the diversification of Lapis's first complex life and the development of new macrobiological ecosystems. Today, we'll cover the first mass extinction event since the runaway oxygenation of primal Lapis in episode 1. This collapse will not be by the hand of geological indifference, nor the whim of celestial fate. Yet again, this punishment will be wrought by the selfish hubris of life itself. Extinction by that of the imperious worm. The golden star shines above, as it always has. Its immense gravity churns its hellish innards, fusing helium and hydrogen into heavier elements, shedding a constant, blazing barrage of light in the process. At a great distance, this light rains heavenly onto Lapis's brilliant blue and white surface. Lapis is a large, rocky world. Its iron core, a signature product of star life, only slightly outscales the core of our Earth. While overall less dense, Lapis's grand size results in its surface gravity modestly approaching twice that of Earth's. Roughly 5 billion years ago, convection currents in Lapis's mantle had nearly frozen alongside its surface. A common process which would have silently condemned the emergence of life, preserving the celestial body in that state for uncountable indifferent eons as the golden star chugged onward, trailing its finished artwork behind. But this was not to be the case for Lapis. A dark, densely metallic object was slowly ejected from its tight orbit around the golden star. After drifting helplessly outward, it was, after much effort, captured by Lapis and humbled into a satellite. The Iron Moon's pull has since reinvigorated Lapis's mantle and fluxed its surface ice into an encumbering but life-sustaining ocean. While Lapis's core gives it about the same magnetic vigor as Earth, its moon can no longer assist. Without an active body, its magnetosphere has gone dead. One life in exchange for another. The Iron Moon's dark surface makes it much less noticeable from the surface than our moon from Earth. A faded blemish in daylight and an obstruction of the heavens at night. The corpse of a world hung in foreboding remembrance. Lapis has nearly no axial tilt, with the only discernible measure of time outside of day and night being interpretable from the Iron Moon's elliptical proximity, and with it the pulsing vitality of the planet's tides. Intense gravity clings an impressive atmosphere to Lapis's surface, shielding its innumerable children from radiation and material intervention. For 4 billion years, Lapis, for a life-bearing world, was almost disappointing. Locked in a low-energy, anaerobic state of life, little had changed in that time, other than the slow expansion of the golden star. This all changed a little over 1 billion years ago, when a group of photosynthetic, oxygen-producing, calcareous cells evolved. The exoforams tipped life upside down by releasing never-before-seen levels of poison into their stagnant world: oxygen. While most life collapsed, new cells came to abuse oxygen as a potent source of energy. Before long, Lapis was reborn. With bare cliffs of stone now replaced by the endless, glimmering white skeletons of exoforams, and waters stained with hues of yellow, purple, and green, millions of years of microorganisms have built up endless groves of star-fed pasture, placidly shared amongst the blind sprawlings of its multicellular inhabitants, until they grow to impugn their hapless kindergarten, that is. Lapis's poles, despite their constant starving of light, have been eroding away from the encroaching girth of its star. Its glacial adornments have been softening into its oceans for long enough to submerge the majority of its dry land, leaving only a modest, yet expansive, spinning berg on each pole. This warming has extended habitable zones far enough north and south for complex life to slug beneath the day-long pinkish skies signature to the planet's obliquely lit poles. While Earth, at this level of life's complexity, possessed oceans nearly entirely out of fresh water, Lapis's 5 billion years spent without roots to hold its land together has taken quite a toll. Deeply gouged canyons give way to barren, sandy beaches. The washed-up bodies of helpless alien life bake and desiccate in the unrelenting sunlight. So many minerals have washed into the planet's seas, both from land and from the ancient dust once sealed within hundreds of feet of ice, that Lapis's oceans are as salty as Earth's are today. All complex life on Lapis is specialized to exist in salt water. Entering freshwater would cause an organism to, in an attempt to balance salt levels, bloat their cells with water and die. This is not an impenetrable barrier. In fact, Lapis's rivers and streams do sustain sparse microbial life. However, complex life will have to work much harder to migrate inland than our ancestors on Earth did, and do. That, of course, is a problem for much later, as life on Lapis has just created a worm. Isomeria is a group defined by their ancestral plant-like zigzagging or glide reflection of growth. However, within the headed isomerians, Capitomorpha, the invert isomerians possess both a nerve net and deep creases within a slimy muscular foot. To prevent the organisms from uncontrollably preferring either right or left, the head and its structures are expressed with bilateral symmetry. The bladders that make up much of their bodies do little more than help pass nutrients around, while the foot creases act as centers of digestion. Passed down by the movement of cilia, particles of food are brought into the creases, where they cannot easily leak out, while individual cells break down and absorb them. While many of the enormous invert isomerians have already gone extinct due to their fragility in an increasingly obstacle-ridden environment, thanks in no small part to calcareomorph macaronophyte reefs, thousands of smaller species are still crawling about in amoeboid fashion. At a small enough scale, the bladders characteristic of the isomerians may no longer be necessary to distribute nutrients, thus leaving the organism free to exist as little more than a structurally organized sheet. It's important to clarify that evolution doesn't progress as much as it aimlessly branches out where it's rewarded, like mycelium through soil. The misconception that successful animals get larger as they evolve is especially misleading, and also very silly. It's historically led to ignorance and misrepresentation over the emergence of Earth's birds, as well as the now rather innocuous relations between the Cambrian lobopods and extant onychophorans and tardigrades. Very closely related organisms can often differ greatly in size, with size not being particularly indicative of complexity. Single cells like stentor are larger than most fairy flies. For the sake of simplicity, we won't be discussing much in the manner of microscopic life. What's most pertinent is the understanding that this dominating lineage of Lapis life emerged not from the visually impressive giant invert isomerians, but from a nearly microscopic predator of bacteria, dwarfed by filter-feeding single cells. Even with a fruitful fossil record, hypothetical future alien paleontologists would never be able to accurately piece together the exact ancestry of the furrow worm. A now 3-foot-long leviathan, representing a clade of mostly minuscule motilomorphs. Furrow worms, more formally sulcus vermes, have foregone the complicated array of folds under the body in preference for a single digestive cleft to match a long, serpentine body. By organizing their oral folds into a singular furrow with thin internal passages for spreading nutrients through the body, furrow worms have formed themselves into tubes. Sort of. In cross-section, they resemble pinched horseshoes, with an open body cavity extending from what constitutes a head to what similarly constitutes a tail. This structure has allowed the organism to form repeated and symmetrical muscle bands along the body. What once destroyed fertile sea floor has since become an ecosystem of its own. Calcareomorph reefs are largely inhabited by gelatopulmes, filter-feeding organisms which only use the reefs as perches. The rough, jagged tangles of stony bone gather a significant amount of detritus in their choking depths. The knotted labyrinth breaks off the flow of water through its stands, letting only tiny captomorphs and specialized giant linguisomers partake in the reef's yield, until the emergence of the giant sulcus vermes. The leviathan furrow worm has evolved to climb through calcareomorph tangles. Originally drawn to find cover from turbulent waters brought by storms, furrow worms now thrive in these stony mazes. While no longer as pliable and amoebic as other invert hysomerians, their muscle bands allow them to contract and extend forward like leeches. The upturned oral surface at their fronts not only serves to smell the environment ahead, but to grab and hold on to whatever it reaches toward. Furrow worms have suddenly become the fastest organisms on the planet, but only when climbing through thickets of stone xanthophylls. In the open, they struggle to grip the slimy substrate, appearing visibly uneasy, lengthening and contracting rapidly, swinging in all directions in hope of a foothold. Organisms so reliant on instinct don't fare well outside of their intended environment. Navigating the reef, eating detritus, and trapping the occasional small isomerian in their body cleft for digestion does them remarkably well nonetheless. The furrow worms, while sexually capable, like all motilomorphs, must remain simple enough to reproduce through fission. The organism's tail can sever itself and form a new front while retaining the mother's memories, one of Isomeria's most valuable traits, a trait which will soon inadvertently cause a mass extinction event. While the exotheres have thrived on the seafloor in the scum age, the xanthophylls have not seen comparable diversification. Where exotheres are cradled by the microbial mats, xanthophylls subsist in spite of them. The calcareomorphs may dominate very specific depths, but they cannot exist in water too close or too far from the surface. Their ability to constantly construct and climb a tower of stone prevents them from being swallowed by sand or by encroaching microbial mats. No other xanthophylls can grow in said conditions, and so must rely on clean, rocky footholds, a rarity in the scum age. Larger grained sand prevents the spread of microbial mats, as the grains shift and slide with and into the surf, unable to be bogged down by layering scum. Unfortunately, a xanthophyll without a rock will eventually be buried as well. Salatiophytes circumvent this by floating very close to the surface, but this strategy is stifling, especially when nearly all xanthophylls can only reproduce by duplicating themselves. Nearly all xanthophylls being a recent footnote. Lanolomorpha has only recently emerged, the first group of xanthophylls to evolve sexual reproduction. Like motilomorphs, this really just means that they shed as many gametes as they can into the water. Since all sexually reproductive organisms on Lapis do this, different species will be triggered to release gametes only after their very specific parameters have been met to avoid oversaturation. The sheer quantity and constant surplus of unsuccessful gametes makes for a significant portion of Lapis's cycle of nutrients. Participation in sexual reproduction now makes lanolomorphs the most adaptable clade of xanthophylls in existence. They go about it in a different way than motilomorphs do. Where motilomorphs rely on a compatible egg and sperm colliding, lanolomorphs provide a rather large structure supporting an egg, which passes captured sperm to it. This is called a gametophyte, and it looks indistinguishable from the flaky growths of basal lanolomorphs. The gametophyte itself is haploid, possessing half of the DNA of the actual diploid organism, the sporophyte, like this paniform. The sporophyte releases spores which grow into gametophytes, who in turn release sperm. Once the gametophyte's egg is fertilized, a newly diploid sporophyte emerges from and either fuses with or cannibalizes the gametophyte for its successful foothold. This strategy ensures that every fused embryo emerges onto a habitable perch, drastically reducing the amount of doomed embryos. The relationship between the gametophyte and the sporophyte could be considered part of a life cycle, an external womb, or even one of the organism's sexes. No matter which way it's categorized, it is a very successful reproductive strategy. The gametophyte is able to persist for multiple years due to being an independent photosynthetic body, increasing the likelihood of its egg being fertilized every time the species' spawning conditions are met. Although the sporophyte can only reproduce directly through propagation, it frees the organism from many biological constraints. In this instance, the ability to produce thin, layering leaf-like structures. The oldest leaves are pushed outward as new leaves are formed in the center, or apex. Although they resemble broad-leafed earth plants, paniforms don't differentiate the top and bottom surfaces of each leaf to specialize for photosynthesis and respiration, respectively. Paniforms also lack anything resembling roots, apart from a holdfast. Nutrients are absorbed directly through the organism's cloth-like surface, whisked up by the nourishing flow of the sea. While not typically addressed to much notice, photosynthetic organisms also release waste. The forgiving aquarium world of Lapis does not demand the complexities of stomata as Earth does its land plants. Oxygen, a waste product of photosynthesis, subtly exudes from the skin of our alien flora. Carbon dioxide is also cast out as refuse, though less wastefully than in motilomorphs. It bears repeating that the intensity of Lapis's gravity is all-encumbering. Underwater, this most clearly manifests in stricter depth and pressure ranges than those seen on Earth. The hydrostatic pressure from swimming to the bottom of a 10-foot swimming pool is notable, but not particularly hazardous. 5 feet under the surface waters of our alien world would feel just as crushing. Diving 10 feet here would risk decompression sickness. While small organisms circumvent this by pressurizing themselves and never intentionally leaving their preferred depths, the newly emerging large-bodied xanthophylls have encountered a problem. Light can only travel so far through water. The basking shallows offer heavy competition with a humble diversity of lanolomorphs and suffocating patches of calcareomorphs and microbial mats. Deeper waters bring the promise of refuge, but for a price. To compensate for the dimness of the seafloor, where deep specialist sporophytes and their gametophytes must start their lives, the accessory pigments in their bodies may trend heavily toward brown. This is because blue wavelengths of light pierce deepest into the sea, absorbed best by orange, and therefore brown. This follows a general trend, wherein the browns of deeper water xanthophylls gradate from a brassy color to the iconic pallid gold that names the clade. As with most aspects of biology, this is not a rule. The low pigmentation of lime species is especially dynamic, with shallow forms dominating the red spectrum, and deeper forms not wasting any light otherwise discarded by accessory pigments. Of course, this gradation of hue is not a new invention within xanthophylifera. The real price of the deep is pressure. Taller growth is encouraged to reach brighter light, but the difference in pressure between new and old growth can be enough to impede the flow of nutrients. In order to grow tall, xanthophylls like this, the star-edged Stelancipitiforms, must adapt. This group, sired from the gametophytes of the paniforms, are vascular. No longer sporting paper-thin leaves, Stelancipitiforms have evolved phloem tissue. This pressurized tissue forces sugars produced in the prolific newer growth downward against the will of the water. Phloem allows these vascular xanthophylls to grow immense. This species of Stelancipitiform alone can grow over 20 feet tall by casting its leaves, which generate from shafts on the holdfast, to the heavens. This early into the worm age, they are Lapis's largest creatures. With complexity comes a different kind of fragility. Severing areas of the body with phloem tissues would leak valuable sugars until the wound could grow to clasp itself shut. The outer surface is now much more rubbery than in their ancestors to compensate. Their thickened skin also helps them to resist torsion that would easily cleave their basal cousins. The sawtooth edges characteristic of the Stelancipitiforms act as braces. They lock each tapering chain to its neighbors, together helping to remain vertical so as to not waste their height bent over the seafloor. In the previous episode, we discussed the emergence of the turbogelates. While the giant, immobile forms have been declining due to competition with the much more vigorous gelatopalmes, the turbogelates as a whole are going strong. They evolved from microscopic plankton and will remain a staple of Lapis's zooplankton ad infinitum. A near-infinite diversity of these spiral-mouthed creatures will filter bacteria and small cells long after their titanic relatives disappear. Without any specialized muscle tissue, planktonic turbogelates are locked into the shape their genes build them into. The cells making up the skin of their solid bodies can choose to excrete slime, grip like Velcro, or even cast out anchors, depending on the species, to roost. A mycelium-like fuzz coating rocks is not a strange sight. They're just the brooding masses of tiny filter feeders locking down in response to irregular pressure changes. The sea collecting together its jelly plankton is prophetic of an incoming storm. The Octoradiatherians are best represented by the wide diversity within Maranutia, the sea nuts, but basal benthic forms still exist. The Mare Superia, or sea crawlers, have been on a steady decline thanks to the success of the capitomorphs. However, it is this humble group which will spawn the first herbivores as we know them. This is a member of Calla superia, a cover crawler. A calcium carbonate shell shields its back, while 8 snail-like feet muscularly slide it in whichever direction it wishes. Mucus secreted by its feet allows it to, again, like snails, selectively slip over or stick to surfaces. Consequently, this also makes it very poor at traveling over sand. Silt, mud, scum, and stone are a raceway in comparison. The radial nature of cover crawlers actually makes them better at utilizing their mode of locomotion than Earth's snails. There's no need to waste energy turning around when you essentially have 8 faces. However, the shell is not for defense against predators. It's to defend against the impartial cruelness of the churning sea. But let us first gain context for the anatomy of the cover crawler. A cleft between each foot reaches an apex where it rests in a notch in the rim of the shell. The flesh looping this feature is very sensitive to smell, with the hole it surrounds sucking in water for both finer chemical analysis and respiration. Water and waste is then jettisoned out from the pore on the creature's back, casting it far from the body. Pigmentation in its skin prevents sunlight from burning it, even in well-lit water. But what makes cover crawlers exceptional lies inside and underneath their bodies. The oxygen demand to upkeep 8 undulating muscular feet and a pumping respiratory system is substantial. Cover crawlers are the first of Lapis's life to evolve oxygen carriers in their blood. Hemerythrin is about 1/4 as efficient as our hemoglobin blood, but it's still leagues above the oxygen intake of anything else on the planet. Very unlike our blood, hemerythrin is also less than 1/4 as attracted to carbon monoxide, making them comparably very resistant to carbon monoxide poisoning. Their blood is different in hue as well. It's normally clear but violet pink when oxygenated. Like hemoglobin, however, it is small enough to be held within special transport cells rafting within the sprawling veins of nutrient transport in the body. This all sounds very derived, but one more secret lies within the Calima superior, or rather, beneath, as these are also the first creatures on Lapis to evolve jaws. 16 of them. To partition their niches from those of capitomorphs, Calima superians have been trending away from absorbing food directly off of the surface of microbial mats. Instead, they have begun rasping away at the surfaces of lanolomorph xanthophylls. Underneath each foot cleft lies a radula covered in spines to scratch off food particles. Each radula tucks into a mouth which individually leads to a central stomach. Around each radula are the edges of 2 different feet. On these edges lie teeth made from an alloy of chitin and the staple calcium carbonate. Cover crawlers can stick to the bodies of lanolomorphs and chew off pieces of flesh to be processed by their radulae. Their external shells serve only to root muscles and to protect them from being battered into rocks, while the leaves they cling to are pummeled by waves. Sprawls of lanolomorph gametophytes are grazed on by these lumbering beasts. Even the most spiraling canopies aren't safe from their 16 jaws. The rubbery hides of these alien flora are an otherwise untapped resource. Every adaptation the cover crawlers have is in service of this niche. Adaptations that will serve them well in the upcoming apocalypse. While the sea nuts are among the most diverse lineages yet emerged, they are very visually similar. Specializing for very specific depths, temperatures, and particle size has been kind to them. Enough time has passed since their emergence that 3 main groups have settled. The basal sea nuts, which look more or less the same as our example species, remain the most diverse, albeit the least visually divergent. The other 2 groups, instead of specializing for a specific depth, have adapted to shift between the surface and the deep, with the rise and fall of the sun. The lemon nuts, Mare Lemonia, have quite an eye-catching hue in the cerulean daytime surface waters. Ancestrally feeding on phytoplankton, this group has truced with a species of alien algae, rearing them within a subsurface layer of skin. These tiny organisms, who themselves have photosynthetic bacteria living inside of them, now in turn live inside of the subdermal cells of lemon nuts. The translucent skin of the sea nut lets more than enough light through to their algae when resting near the surface. The algae inject sugars into the lemon nut in return for safety and the guarantee of sufficient lighting, as the host can both fight the current and make its way to the surface every morning. At night, when they no longer feel the slight burn of the sun, they make their way down into the twilight zone, navigating with the pressure of the water above them. While they don't have a centralized brain, they're born understanding the rhythm of the planet's rotation and cycle up and down along with an unseen sun. While they still filter feed during the day to support the energy costs of swimming, their algal allyship lets them thrive in the poorly productive open waters of their world. If one were to be lost adrift in Lapis's expansive seas, flecks of gold would be seen glimmering in the endless blue, like far-off stars in a daylit sky. Conversely, there are also sea nuts who perform the opposite strategy, erupting to the surface in the dead of night and recoiling to the depths at day. This is Avathis nucian, generally fairly large sea nuts, with the featured species measuring nearly a foot from the tip of the central pressure tentacle to the bottom of the combed crown. The relative enormity of this species is due to its large particle feeding size, lemon nut size, up to an inch. As the deep sea nut ascends from the gloom, its muscular tentacles capture sizable prey. In the case of this monster, mainly lemon nuts who are diving for the night. Sticky slime ensnares planktonic and nectonic prey alike, passing it down to the singular opening in the bottom of the crown. Closing the opening ensures the prey can move only into its stomach, deep within the muscular bell. The comb of paddles formed from fused cilia, as in all sea nuts, propel the organism through the water. But few sea nuts can plow themselves through water as strongly as these large particle feeders. Although its red coloration is typical of deep-sea creatures on Earth, its scarlet tinge isn't for camouflage. There is yet to be a more frightening beast in the open sea, and no creature has yet to discern an image from radiation. In a world of the blind, a cast net will eventually reap rewards. The red pigmentation in this organism is actually an alarm system, which ensures that it dives away from the sun. As they do not reorient themselves, the bell is perpetually held above the crown. If the bell heats up by absorbing strong green and blue light near the surface, and the pressure tentacle confirms a shallow depth, it will know to dive and seek shelter. In a way, the entire surface of the organism acts as an eye. The progress of evolution can be almost sardonically indecisive. While the representative species of furrowworm is an absolute titan, most are small. Some have returned to being very small. One group in particular has gotten small enough that a single long furrow representative of the clade is no longer practical. The structure has been fully internalized, making the creature little more than a muscular tube with a mouth at one end and an anus at the other. With this, the coelom exoverms have emerged, with the mud threads, Lutophilemia, being among the most basal. Lapis has now produced a worm almost indistinguishable from Earth's nematodes. It might seem that the winners of Lapis's biosphere are the extremely derived cover crawlers, or perhaps the debatably apex predators that are the deep sea nuts. However, if the winners are the numerous, the diverse, and the least at risk of extinction, the winners of Lapis are surely the mud threads. A wholly internal gut allows these Lutophilemians to grab a mouthful and continue performing other behaviors, unlike the overwhelming majority of Lapis's creatures, which must rest atop their meals for hours at a time. Being able to search for food while simultaneously digesting is a luxury that only the sea nuts had previously enjoyed. Similarly, by flailing wildly, mud threads are able to take underwater flight and enter the water column. Sea nuts are no longer the sole denizens of the open water. Although mud threads cannot swim for long, their low trophic niche of feasting on plankton, microbial mats, and the corpses of the dead lets them dominate sunlit waters. While most rest atop and within the substrate, in active waters there is a constant writhing cloud of mud threads swarming the other creatures of Lapis. If they could see, their vision would be constantly impeded by the infestation. This biosphere did not evolve with mud threads in mind, and it will come to buckle under their prolificness. The death of the scum age to the worm age came not with the first worm, but with the first worm capable of disturbing the substrate. The base of the food web has, for billions of years, been the microbial mats. Denizens of the blue world have mowed the topmost layers of the endless fields for eons. The mud threads refuse to stay atop the microbial mats. They will, thanks to their shape, plunge their heads in and burrow, violently sundering the frailly separated layers of the microbial mat. The structures of the mats rely on the differing metabolisms making up each layer remaining separated, and oxygenating the lower layers disrupts the entire formation. Within only a few million years, the mud threads alone assassinate the ecological structure of the entire world. Stepping foot off of Lapis's spanning beaches and into the water would muddle hundreds of the tiny writhing creatures, glittering white in the sun with every trudging step. The world is unbalanced. The world is rotting itself away. The ecological destruction seen here is difficult to imagine. The pace of devastation felt is comparable to that of all non-grass plants on Earth, from the mightiest tree to the humblest hornwort, being eradicated by insects in only a few 100,000 years. As if bent on destruction, with the shrinking of the microbial mat biomes, mud threads are themselves running out of their most abundant food source. Some mud threads may benefit considerably from feeding on living hosts as well as the dead. By ejecting their thorny throats, barbworms, spicule vermes, can latch onto the soft, gelatinous bodies of nearly every creature on the planet, sucking out innards or tearing out a gullet full of flesh. Few large metallomorphs can defend against this seething parasitic assault. Cover crawlers can purse their holes and hunker down under their shells, or even seek refuge high in the ribboning leaves of deepwater lanolomorphs. Sea nuts can avoid the seafloor entirely, but creatures unable to escape the substrate are plagued with an insurmountable blight of worms. The most basal organisms are hit the hardest. The sudden and drastic reduction of the most active and ubiquitous biome on the planet removes their context. Outside of their context, the most instinct-driven creatures suffer helplessly against threats they didn't have millions of years to react to. The cover crawlers are now the last of the benthic octoradiatherians, only flourishing in the most bountiful groves of microbes due to their niches heavily overlapping with those of the speedier capitomorphs. The old sea crawlers were among the first to be expunged by the age of the worms. They went extinct almost immediately after the mud threads evolved. Hypothetical alien paleontologists would be able to extrapolate this correlation and mark the transition between the scum and worm ages as distinct spans of time. Lapis looks on to an uncertain future as its children flounder in voiceless agony. The old sea crawlers are far from the last victims of the vermin plague. The basalmost dilatarians have gone extinct directly after the emergence of the spicule vermes. Every last species of stem motilomorph, the spirocarns, basal isomerians, and unabdominian puromorphs leave Lapis with precious few clear fossils to document them. The multi-abdominin puromorphs persist, however, mostly in the frigid, abyssal seafloors. These largest of the isomerians chug onward in the inhospitable pressure, reaping the reigning particulate rewards of the unnoticed decimation from far above. Active exoverms can't support themselves in such low-energy conditions. Other than the exoverms themselves, all macroscopic invertisomerians have suffered too greatly to continue on. Their sister group within Capitomorpha, the linguisomerians, just barely managed to hang on with a single relic species. The last of Lapis's motile creatures sporting glide reflection are few and far between. The devastation seen in this clade is comparable to every single species of bird going extinct other than the masked finfoot, a seemingly random representative, barely a shadow of the magnificence of their group's history. This species will come to raise 2 new clades from the ashes of the Scum Age in time. As a footnote, the Uatagelates have already gone extinct even before the Worm Age, thus marking a somewhat unnotable farewell. The Gelatoguppies have also fallen to the age of the worms. Unlike the Gelatopons, close relatives under the Quadradiatherian umbrella, they can't eat exoverms. The ravaging thorns of the spiculeworms ensured a swift end. Other than them, the Quadradiatherians have been doing surprisingly well. Multi-Gelatopons have emerged, echoing the multi-abdomina, forming a colony by duplicating their bodies along a central fleshy trunk. These organisms help ensure that damage to a single lung won't cause the death of the individual's genes. Nutrients delivered from the other bodies allows damaged lungs time to heal. Unlike basal gelatopons, these new multi-bodied forms share a single anus at the bottom of the trunk. All water passing through the colony exits from that pore, reducing the amount of exhaled water inhaled by other colony members. Exoverms could be seen gathering and waiting around this opening in hopes of catching excrementory particles, often being blown away in the process. Surface water gelatopons can afford to pump vigorously, a pace almost uncannily similar to that of human lungs. Deep water species still inhale quite quickly, but very gradually squeeze water through their gills and out of their trunks. While this group isn't particularly visually diverse, their filtering gills are the key to organizing them taxonomically. Tiny teeth can be found here, often pectine in nature. Those specialized for swallowing exoverms have teeth resembling barbed wire. Those gathering plankton are often branched. Fossils of these teeth are sure to puzzle any paleontologist until articulated gills are uncovered. Despite these small divergences, all Quadradiatherians still must cling to a hard surface. The ever-expanding calcareomorphs ensure there's no shortage regardless. While the diversity of calcareomorphs is expansive, I can't spend too much time drawing fairly amorphous yellow shapes to represent different sizes, growth patterns, and space utility. However, I must clarify that not all stone xanthophylls take a branching form. Here we see an example of a shelf-form calcareomorph. These forms are much sturdier than the endlessly branching tangles of their ancestors, but they still grow mostly randomly. Building thin calcium sheets out from an edge or center point has done these encrusting reefs well. Their interlacing platforms are now home to a wide variety of life. The swarms of exoverms have finally begun to wind down with the worldwide waning of microbial mats, allowing for the capacious incursion of flaxen xanthophylliferae meadows. The seafloor is no longer a flat cityscape riddled with the slow-motion bustling of crawling entities on a sweeping, sunlit stage. It's now a grayish-brown garden of newly sprouted waving gold. Intermittent between the foliage is the occasional slug-like creature, and up close, the bustling activity of worms. The new world is one of silt and sand, a much more barren world. Or, perhaps, just a more energetically concentrated and active one. The domineering presence of the exoverms cannot be undersold. They directly cause the first mass extinction of macrobiological life on Lapis. Although the majority of genetic lines still exist, it's important to grasp that each clade contains dozens, if not hundreds of thousands of species, or more. The line on Lapis's cladogram continues to be drawn as long as a single species remains. Nevertheless, the microbial mat biome has been nearly entirely phased out for a new garden-type expression of life. A new set of substrates dominate, those of mud, silt, and sand. While Lapis does possess beaches of gravel, stone, and mud, the timeless continuation of the exoforms ensures that most substrates are at least partially sandy. The mouths of waterways billow silt, earth, and minerals from higher ground. It's here where the most active of Lapis's new kinds of ecosystems lie. Rich, erosion-fed soil streaks far into the sea, supporting a dense jungle of soft-bodied xanthophylliferanes. Exoverms burrow, crawl, and swim haphazardly in this new dawn. One group, the Crispicovermes, or wigglers if you're feeling cheeky, have finally achieved balance with what remains of the microbial mats, albeit a bit late. Instead of actively disturbing the layers of substrate, they remain inside of a well-maintained, slime-braced burrow, as seen here. In favorable conditions, these exoverms will gather themselves shallowly in their burrows and writhe their top halves to gather particles of food. Their flailing actually forms a water vortex which sucks in food. The slime secreted from their skin also grabs the detritus they're searching for. Once dusty, they retract back down, leaving no trace at the surface other than a dimple at the burrow's entrance. This group has proved very successful, with ancestral populations slowly migrating to mud and silt as well. While sand and gravel aren't particularly friendly to their burrows, they will adapt for those substrates as well, given time. One population of Crispicovermes also holds something special within their flesh. This is the second lineage on Lapis to evolve blood, in this case, chlorocruorin. An iron-based substance, much like our own blood, this oxygen carrier is occasionally called giant hemoglobin. Giant in that it is too large to be carried by dedicated cells as seen in our red blood cells. Instead, the structures are free-floating within the blood. Chlorocruorin dyes the blood green, but actually appears pinkish in high concentration. While it is a worse oxygen carrier than our hemoglobin blood, it's comparably efficient to the hemerythrin of the cover crawlers. Although, instead of resisting carbon monoxide poisoning, chlorocruorin is even more attracted to it than our blood is. While the green-blooded line of Crispicovermes reap the rewards of endurance in poorly oxygenated waters, their descendants will come to define the new era of life on Lapis. Beneath the undulating leaves of lanolomorphs lie the wiggling faces of hungry, slimy worms. A garden unto their own. While not nearly as suffocating in population as seen in the beginning of the Worm Age, exoverms are still an ever-present part of the water column. The most neutrally buoyant of Lapis's organisms are the sea nuts. At least one group of these octoradiatherians is sure to take notice of this bountiful resource. From one of the many clades of basal sea nuts emerges the tendrilled sea nuts, with a torpedo nut, Torpedonutia, seen here representing the group. While the crowns of sea nuts are rigid and sometimes calcified, their bells are muscular and flexible. Many shallow water species like this will occasionally rest with their bells on the sea floor. In that sense, the elongate bell is nothing particularly unusual. What is, however, are the 8 tendrils trailing behind. Each strand is flexible but more wiry than wriggly. They're actually projections around the lip of the stomach, which originally emerged to help swallow large food particles. The torpedo nuts are now specialized for trawling up worms. By trailing their tendrils directly above the substrate, they can snag dozens of exoverms per swoop. Their fishing lines are so sticky that getting them bogged up with mud is a valid inconvenience, having to husk off the slime layer and create a new one from scratch. Once captured, food is slowly passed up along the tendril and into the stomach. Soft prey is often fairly twisted and battered at this point, and makes for an easy meal. This trawling method of sea nut hunting extends into deeper waters as well. Without risk of gunking up their lines with mud, open water zeppelinuts can afford to have an extensive array of tendrils lingering behind. Zeppelinuts still possess 8 of these organs, but they branch off to form multiple tips. The frayed, splitting tendrils of the zeppelinut trail behind the crown, slowly seesawing along with the suggestion of the windswept surface waves. Almost the entire organism is crown, with numerous rows and columns of fused cilia driving the bell forward, like a submersed galley. The zeppelinut is the new largest motilomorph, finally dethroning the multi-abdomina. Including their tendrils, some zeppelinut can reach well over 40 feet in length, gathering lemonites and zooplankton like a sieve. Of course, that size is very misleading. Ignoring the tendrils, the largest zeppelinuts are only about 15 feet from crown to bell, and, as in all sea nuts, the crown is almost entirely hollow. The mighty zeppelinut is not to be belittled, however. While it cannot take on prey anywhere near its size, it is a Herculean predator in the open seas, and the face of death even to other sea nuts. The tendrilled sea nuts are pioneers in the worm age, among precious few groups which emerged during the scum age to truly proliferate in this new era. From tendrils are born muscular tentacles, able to manually ensnare prey in winding coils. This is a sand nut, Araneanusia, so called because of their exoskeletons. The bells and crowns of this group are fused into a solid, biomineralized, siliceous shell. Most are small, but still nectonic, themselves feeding on plankton. Their shells make up a notable portion of beach sand, alongside but easily outnumbered by those of the mind-bogglingly diverse exoforams who've been diversifying for billions of years. The shells of sand nuts are very beneficial, protecting their thin skin from damage to the environment, but also from parasitic barbworms. Their shells do decrease their buoyancy, limiting larger members of this group to depths where the seafloor won't crush them when resting. This Gigantoranianusian is a prime example. The bell area of the shell is the widest and heaviest, allowing it to contact the substrate first upon rest to prevent the tentacles from bending or being dragged. The crown area of the shell sports an odd twist along its rows of petals. This twist actually forces the organism into a constant roll, a technique to stabilize the organism while swimming. This rotation also serves as a passive method of separating and preventing tangles in the tentacles. Large sea nuts like this, the species seen here boasting an impressive 4-inch shell, can be seen drilling through clear coastal waters, tentacles twirling in hopes of snagging small prey. A hard, thin skin covers the shell and speckles it with pigment. While at first glance this may appear to be a sort of camouflage, it's actually a form of thermoregulation. Darker colors absorb more heat, and the further north or southward a species of large sea nut is found, the darker in coloration it is to compensate. Not all sea nuts with muscular tentacles are sand nuts. This notably large sea nut is called an Anfracturora, a winding terror. A squat bell lies atop a short, bulging crown. 3 stubby columns of wide paddle rows adorn each cartilaginous sector, dredging kinked, retractable tentacles. A ghoulish gray coloration fancies the spirit of this ghastly specter. While it resembles jellyfish of Earth, the Winding Terror is almost a funhouse mirror version of one. The bell is a muscular tongue-like nose cone. The crown's margins are solid bulges sporting rhythmically beating paddles. In place of stinging cells, the Winding Terrors have sticky slime and sandpaper-like hooks. When prey is seized, the tentacle immediately begins kinking over itself to envelop and immobilize the catch. Food is reeled into the crown, then dropped into a gaping stomach. Many of the Winding Terror's adaptations serve its specialization toward gigantism and a larger feeding size. Not all of its relatives are as outwardly impressive, but they are internally. The third clade on Lapis to evolve blood. This time, hemocyanin, a copper-based oxygen transporter far too large to be carried by cells. Deoxygenated blood is as clear as the surrounding water, but when oxygenated, it reveals a rich royal blue. Hemocyanin is of comparable efficiency to the hemerythrin and chlorocrurin of their derived blooded contemporaries, but it holds a hidden benefit. Under highly pressurized and cold conditions, hemocyanin is actually significantly more efficient at gathering oxygen than even our hemoglobin. These azure-veined octoradiatherians are far and above the most active members of deep and frigid waters. This is a mushroom sea nut, Funginutia. Adapted for filter feeding exoverms from silt, this group has undergone some odd modifications. The bell and crown have fused, and in place of the typical rows of paddles are 2 fleshy, muscular rings. Everything below is a distension of the stomach lip, and an expandable bag-like form used to gulp clouds of silt before squeezing it out against the bases of the tentacles. The fleshy rings expand and contract in unison, driving the organism upward in a much more jellyfish-like manner than that seen in the Winding Terror. Even in waters shielded above by ice, these creatures can be seen standing vertically, probing up the substrate with their tentacles before gulping and rising a few body lengths above the floor, then drifting back down, and repeating. A billowing cloud of dark silt descends into the fog behind them as they remain unaware that their world has ever been any different. Unaware of the ravages that worms, just like those they reap, had enacted during the end of the Age of Scum. The lanolomorph xanthophores have continued to diversify in our absence. From the vascular xanthophores rise the clinging xanthophores, represented here by the boreriforms, or bubble wrap lanolomorphs. Most significantly, in the sporophytes of this group, the holdfast has been altered into a cluster of flexible hooks. These hooks not only allow them to clamp and lock themselves into finer substrates, but they're invaluable for their role in resituating a hold after being displaced by storms. The hooks curl themselves when deactivated, firmly gripping as a unit, but turgor pressure allows them to release or reset their grip. The bubble wrap name comes from the gas bubbles riveting the body's surface. 2 symmetrical halves bifurcate the single long leaf, which the clawed base builds out until reaching the surface. The organism's waste gases, carbon dioxide and oxygen, are released into these bubble-shaped organs to help keep the leaf erect in the water. While cover crawlers do prey on these, and all xanthophores, they tend to ignore the gas bladders. Popping them is highly disorienting and often leads to plummeting back down to the seafloor. An inconvenience at best, a life-threatening rapid pressure change at worst. Bubble wrap lanolomorph stands are dotted around in deeper waters, occasionally forming forest-like clusters. Many of the taller, deeper species are pale green or brown, while mid-water species can be seen in the full xanthophore spectrum. Some even enter low competition areas in very shallow, sandy water thanks to their hooks. Their long bodies don't fare very well in the intertidal zones, though. Those areas belong to their close relatives, the rhizome xanthophores. Parsefoles are vascular lanellomorphs which can sprout new shoots from underground stems. This structure is called a rhizome. Each segment grows to a sufficient size before generating a new link in the chain in front of them. While each link only has 2 roots, it is important to clarify that they're only roots and that they hold the organism down, they don't take in nutrients. Interlacing colonies weave into one another, crisscrossing their rhizomes. In this way, large enough groves of parsefoles project above the surface like grass, but are knotted together underground. These xanthofoles are very good at holding substrate together, and can be found in great pastures at the nutrient-rich zones circling estuaries. Less densely, they can be seen in vast clumps in even the loosest, most open sandy seabeds. These areas often act as oases for benthic and poorly swimming creatures, such as cover crawlers and turbogelates. A powerful enough tempest will lift up the island of alien vegetation and set it back down elsewhere. The slightly crinkled surfaces of the leaves reveal their internal structure behind rubbery skin. Veins. In this group, the veins are essentially straight lines from the base of the leaf to the tip. This works very well with their thin, relatively long, little leaves. Some parsefoles have even managed to enter competition with the calcareomorphs. A simple modification to the parsefole body plan has allowed for almost vinate climbing forms. The clinging hooks now have reinforced, sharpened tips to cut into the skin of calcareomorphs, branch and platform types alike. If the cut is deep enough, the stone xanthofoles will attempt to close the wounds around the roots, locking them in place. The now upward projecting leaves, in this species at least, come in pairs. The individual shown here also shows a double rhizome near the center, where one chain splits into 2. Parsefoles will occasionally branch like this. Any pieces that fall or snap off are free to start new colonies once they regain a grip, be it a calcareomorph, a large lanellomorph, a rock, a cliff face, or even, on rare occasions, the skins of large matillomorphs. It's not unheard of for zeppelinats to inadvertently carry climbing parsefoles a couple thousand miles out to sea. Those that lose their grip plummet downward, a ribbon of gold soon lost in Zephyr midnight. Back at the shoreline parsefole meadows, the chlorocrurin exoverms, which will be informally referred to as greenworms, have been evolving. From crispicoverm ancestors, 3 new body plans have emerged, one committing to the upkeep of a single burrow, 1 tunneler, and 1 swimmer. We'll discuss the burrowing group first, as they're the most similar to their forebears. Secreting a thick layer of slime to support a burrow is an alright tactic, assuming the substrate is forgiving. Sand is not particularly forgiving, but this group of greenworms has come to an interesting conclusion. Instead of just secreting slime, these greenworms ooze calcium carbonate alongside other secretions, ensuring that the burrow won't collapse. Unlike the other shelled creatures of Lapis, this secretion isn't bound to the body. The shelled greenworms are free to leave if they so choose. The oddly winding shapes of their shells are telling of every time they were shifted or tumbled in the sand, bending toward whatever was up at that point of growth. 2 main feeding strategies have emerged alongside the evolution of the shell: filter feeding and fishing. In filter-feeding forms, celopulms, the throat inverts significantly to reveal a whorl of feathery projections to catch drifting food particles. Once a sufficient volume is captured, the throat is retracted before casting out again. The actual body is somewhat fat and short, living in the upper half of the shell when fully retracted. The end half closes itself off and often breaks off if the shell has been used for a long time due to its age and diminutive stature compared to the creature's current size. They prefer to live near estuaries and can be very indecisive as larvae before committing to a burrow location. The feathery structures in filterworms could be considered soft, flexible teeth. Fisher worms, piscatorvermes, are very similar in appearance to filter worms, aside from their throats. With nearly indistinguishable shells and somewhat sausage-shaped bodies, they would be easily confused if not seen feeding. Fisher worms eject their thin, spiny throats and whip them around to snag waterborne exoverms and small sea nuts. Even exoverms of similar size will be eaten happily. Fisherworms prefer active areas with abundant prey. If their home proves less fruitful than anticipated, they will abandon their shell and burrow or crawl to more favorable conditions. When stressed outside of a shell, they will contract into a pinkish or greenish sphere to reduce possible damage. The ancestral form actually more closely resembled fisherworms than filterworms, a spiny, ejectable throat, albeit much less exaggerated and specialized. The spine throat worms, Spinophaustia, are actually the most similar in anatomy to the basal shellworms, just without shells. Their young behave fairly similarly to fisherworms, shell and all, but spine throats will leave their shells behind once they grow large enough. Bulky diggers with thick skin, these green worms will surface to eject their throats, as seen here, skewer prey, and retract their catch back into their bodies, swallowing them whole. One of the first groups on Lapis to actively pursue and attack similarly sized prey, their iron-tipped throat teeth will gash even the toughest cover crawler armor. The only problem is getting their feet to unstick. Their endurance and determination in preying on cover crawlers is admirable, though a bit sickening. A voracious predator relying almost entirely on smell, the spine-throat greenworms are quite monstrous. Going so far as to burrow after other digging exoverms, they're relentless in the chase. Or as relentless as an ovoid worm can be. Their shape contracts and expands in waves along the body, a motion equally suitable for crawling over and under the substrate. The sister clade to the shellworms are those aforementioned other diggers, the burrowworms, Cuniculum vermes. These greenworms are specialized for tunneling through the substrate, built like trains, long and thin, to slice through the ground at Mach speed, for a worm, winding slickly around obstacles. Their main predators, the spine-throat worms, are more in line with the brutish stubbornness of tunnel borers. While some burrowworms are themselves predatory, what better shape for eating long tubes than a long tube? Many are detritivores, swallowing cylinders of silt and sand for processing as they chug along. While shellworms move with a somewhat unsettling pulsing undulation, burrowworms are much more clearly segmented. Each pleat sits inside another and can be stretched outward to nearly double its apparent length. This gives the burrowworm a surprising level of extension and retraction. A slight bulging of blood in a few segments helps to grip the walls of the burrow, while portions of the body are either retracted and dragged along, or driven forward, piercing through the ground. The fossorial, detritivorous activities of burrowworms are actually beginning to form a never-before-seen substrate in particularly active zones, subaqueous soils, dense collections of organic matter, clay, and rock. Of course, this group is still present in all but the most deserted substrates across the world, be it mud, sand, gravel, sunshine, or abyss. A more basal group of greenworms split off before the divergence between shellworms and burrowworms, this being the sheetworms, sheet vermes. Putting the oxygen gained from their chlorocrurin blood to good use, sheetworms oscillate muscular flaps projecting from the sides of their bodies to grip the water. This allows even large species to fly up into the sea, with this group of dilatarians finally able to join the sea nuts in the tectonic water column. The fleshy sheets can crinkle up against the body when not in use, but easily fan out once the worm wishes to take off. While most species only swim to reach richer feeding grounds with haste, some can remain suspended nearly indefinitely. Delicate ribbons dancing in choreographed cacophony, performed on a stage with no audience, no single witness. as a giant sheet worm lurches its hulking form into the water, sprawling its wings in arduous labor. It disturbs and buffets the dancing of its kin. The world is blind to itself, sentient only to smell and to touch. Sheetworms are widely diverse, though, like the sea nuts before them, many are indistinct in appearance. In a world of smell, they're as rich and colorful as any, but to us, a flappy worm is pretty much just as wormy and flappy as any other flappy worm. That being said, their swimming is not their only derived trait. Out of the front of the throat, which similarly to the burrowworms cannot invert, as it does in the shellworms, the sheetworms have formed a somewhat tadpole-like mouth. A muscular upper lip opposes a toothed flange. By holding a stray fragment of lanolomorph, restrained prey, or simply by mashing the mouth onto a tasty surface, squirming movements and gentle gnashing scrapes manageable particles off for consumption. The mouth is underneath the sheet, with the front dedicated for smell more than propulsion. Sheetworms can, while being a bit hyperbolic, target and grapple onto prey from high above, like hawks. Their lack of vision can make witnessing this somewhat pathetic, but nearby thrashing prey is easily seen through the sensation of water pressure arising with vibration. While sheetworms vary greatly in niche, the ability to travel long distances in between feeding locations is very beneficial. Small forms find it easy to remain suspended, but larger species are much more capable of traveling notable distances. Without the neutral buoyancy of sea nuts, or the gaseous retention of bubble wrap lanulomorphs, sheetworms must constantly fight to stay in the water. If they stop moving, they'll gradually sink to the bottom, so the open sea is a dead zone for them. While it will be some time before they snowball the adaptations required to conquer the briny blue, we'll document their derivedness one noteworthy clade at a time. This is a finworm. From sheetworm ancestors, this group has been optimizing its swimming to reduce wasted energy. Instead of growing a single energetically costly hypertrophied fin, as is the case in other sheetworms, finworms have separated their skirts into 6 individual fins, the extra being the flap around the front end of the creature. Still used for smell, it also helps the organism glide forward once it stops moving, instead of sinking straight downward. Before discussing the rest of the head, we must first take note of its other fins, as these will be passed down long into the future. On each side is a trailing anterior fin, starting soon after the head and pinching down past the halfway point of the body. Behind the anterior fins are what we will call posterior fins. At the end of the tail lies the caudal fin, where most of the propulsion is generated. Instead of using the entire body to grab water, finworms mostly rely on the caudal fin's quick and wide swing through the water to propel them. The other fins take no small part in this action, but the up and down motion of the body ensures that the distalmost end of the body will move the most, and therefore be the most efficient location for a fin. Each fin remains very flexible and wavy if the need arises, but this organization is far more efficient at swimming than that of their ancestors. Instead of clawing their way up into the water, finworms can now rhythmically beat their bodies to push themselves forward, a far more direct approach. While it may seem odd that these worms may learn to swim with an up and down motion due to the prevalence of fish on Earth, there are counterexamples. Many crustaceans swim with a downward motion of their tails, as do cetaceans and many other mammals. Just because fish swim laterally, side to side, doesn't mean that it is inherently superior to dorsoventral style swimming. In fact, Lapis's finworms share a striking resemblance to Earth's arrowworms, whose accepted fin names I've used to describe the former. As a quick reiteration, this project serves not to show how unique life can be, but to show how incredibly divergent it can become. Although, the projections of the face of our finworms offer nothing similar to the hooks of arrowworms. Taking a closer look, these projections are actually soft tentacles which sprout from the upper lip of the mouth. These tentacles are sensory, both for smell and touch, and also help the organism to grip its mouth onto a surface to roost. In specializing for swimming, they've begun to lose the ability to rest comfortably on the ground. Unable to move in any other way than swimming, resting for a fin worm means going limp while sucking on a rock or a leaf. The mouth is otherwise very similar to other sheet worms, although differing diets do make this structure, and especially their teeth, very recognizable and taxonomically categorical. Meanwhile, the pits on the top of the head fin aren't eyes. They're arguably nostrils. Two pores, which take in water through two corridors, dodging the throat, filled with high surface area and richly blooded tissue. In other words, gills. This dual pump system leads to two separate exhausts underneath the space between the head and the anterior fins. Water entering each head pore is quickly analyzed for scent. Having two gives them a binocular sense of smell, able to perceive in which direction scents waft from. While the advent of predation during Earth's Cambrian is often quite exaggerated and misrepresented to suit a narrative of progression through stages, we have yet to reach an equivalent to the ever-touted first apex predator. As with our Anomalocaris' lack of impact on similarly sized contemporaries such as large armored trilobites, so does our Lepiscus prey largely on small, waterborne prey. Lepiscus is a genus of saucer sea nuts, derived Funganusian hemocyanin sea nuts. The two fleshy rings seen in more basal mushroom-shaped sea nuts have specialized into two distinct structures. The outermost ring remains a jellyfish-like hood for swimming, but the inner ring has flushed with blood and squeezes out as soft curls of delicate flesh. Blood nearly surfaces through thin skin here for gas exchange with the open water, pulsing vitality through the beast with every beat of the hood. While parasites, especially barbworms, pose a significant threat to the exposed respiratory organs, Lepiscus and its kin gather an exceptional amount of oxygen. Saucer sea nuts of the frigid, crushing depths gather oxygen levels comparable to surface water fish, such as mackerel sharks. Lepiscus, however, is a warm, shallow water inhabitant, and is a bit less efficient. Powerful muscles bulge visibly from under the hood of the creature, branching out to draw every sector of the hood into precisely calculated maneuvers. Even the respiratory tentacles can kink and wave upon their own volition to disturb the activities of external parasites. A cluster of nerves in the center of the hood's back coordinates the creature's movement, a structure that can now be considered a brain. Down past the brain and between large muscles of the hood are another set of slimmer, more flexible muscles. While the entire distended structure is normally retracted at rest, hence the saucer name, this array of muscles controls the gulping mouth. Muscles and vessels near the end of this strange throat thin out and give way to an expansive, stretchy oral hood. The oral hood engulfs water, and much stronger muscles of the oral lip purse it shut and force the structure closed while expelling the water before drawing the throat back into the stomach. Characteristically, the stomach is immediately below the brain. Powerful tentacles on the oral lip smell, feel, grab, and manipulate, allowing even sizable prey to be lifted up into the alien saucer. Be it a swarm of writhing green worms or a solitary finworm, few are safe from the Lepiscus, a 5-foot diameter spectacle. But why? At the base of every oral tentacle is a black dot, a cup of radiation-sensitive cells, photoreceptors tethered to nerve fibers, organs capable of detecting and observing the radiation scattered by objects and living organisms. Lepiscus is among the first of life on Lapis to develop eyes. When the throat and mouth are retracted, the saucer's many eyes stare vacantly downward. Multiple points of perspective give the creature depth perception for its rudimentary vision. With no color and no focus, the eyes see little more than blurry figures and glimmering lights, but with so many eyes, a useful image can still be constructed. Sizable, mobile silhouettes are its favorite. Centering its ring of eyes above the target, the Lepiscus reaches its throat toward its prey, engulfing it within its oral hood and thrashing tentacles. Prey is swiftly gummed up by thick mucus and drawn all the way up into the stomach. Like all sea nuts, the detritus left over from digestion is eventually coughed back up for the exoverms to process further. Vision, no matter how poor, in a world of the blind, is an advantage so great that it will come to define the future of Lapis's life. The planet's crystal clear waters finally have eyes with which to gaze upon its beauty. Lepiscus can only discern the size and movement of light and dark, but the fettered threshing of its prey may be the first admired observations committed to warm memory on this hushed and unnoticed gray and blue world. With great success in the Scum Age came the ravaging of that world at the dawn of the Worm Age. Yet, through total ecological collapse, through the emergence of predation both from the waters above in the form of sea nuts and sheetworms, and from below as in the spine-throat and burrowworms, the linguisomers hung on. Their extant capitomorph kin have foregone their glide symmetry for true bilateral symmetry. They have not. Forced to lose their bladders, mortal targets for barbworms, they might not look like they are built from glide reflection, but their muscles alternate in a zigzag pattern from above. The head is more or less symmetrical, but their serpentine bodies are not. What was once a single relict species of linguisomer has now branched into two humble clades following two different strategies to cling on in the Age of Worms. Their ancestor shielded its soft back from voracious parasites by folding the edges of its thick-skinned foot over itself like a shawl. Now, in the wake of new macro-predators, two defensive strategies have evolved. Deterring predators before injury, protecting the individual, and deterring predators after injury, protecting the species. The second strategy seems odd, but is actually even more effective than the former. Lapis, though it now has visually oriented predators, is primarily a world of smell. Crespellies, instead of oxygen carriers, hold only poison within their blood. Large creatures that eat enough of this group of organisms will either be forced to eject the contents of their guts, or die. Upon injury, their blood, which only serves to transport nutrients, seeps into the water, a repugnant display of inedibility. If not instinctual, individuals will learn to be repulsed by the scents of these species. While parasites can adapt to resist and even become immune to their poison, the hurdles of specialization required to do so prevents the over-parasitism that killed off their kind in the early Worm Age. The species presented here is also one of the earliest examples of aposematism on Lapis. Very quickly after the evolution of eyes in Lepiscus and its kin did the demand for a visual correlation between toxicity and appearance emerge in turn. In this case, Crespellies and its closest relatives have come to abstractly mimic something their visually inclined predators already find repulsive: worms. Predators will avoid preying upon very sickly, infected creatures if they can, to prevent themselves from contracting those pestilences. A Lepiscus who takes in worm-riddled prey is sure to get a mouthful of barbworms, especially since Lepiscus and kin have specialized thin-skinned respiratory tissue. They're particularly vulnerable to sucking parasites. The striped pattern on the back of the species gives the illusion of movement through light instead of melanin. The white striations actually contain iridophores, structures that reflect instead of absorbing light. As the surface shifts above, light is glimmered irregularly off of the stripes. In the limited vision of Lepiscus, this white glitter is disturbing and unsanitary, granting Crespellies protection from these predators even from afar. Preferring benefit of the self over the benefit of the species, the Pectentacula, comb-tentacled clade, is not nearly as toxic as members of their sister clade, Crispelles. While still smelling and tasting quite horrible, this group has begun forming armor. The foot is now separated into a walking foot and a knobby mantle over the back. The two lobes of thick-skinned armor can spread out from the body for better breathing. No linguisomers yet possess the ability to respire non-passively, as well as contract inward to defend against injury. With the armor lobes and combed antennae retracted, only particularly large and determined spine throat worms can pry in between their leathery plates and get at their innards. They prevent this by living on and within shelf calcareomorphs. This is also where their knobs come in. While the presence of such structures seems at first only to aid predators in firmly grasping the creature, nothing on Lapis has the proper grasping ability to use it, only thin tentacles which slip off of their slime. These knobs serve an innovative purpose. When agitated or detecting a predator, Pectentacula will lodge themselves into tight corners and crags, then expand their armor lobes. The knobs lock their already very squishy, flattenable bodies into places their predators cannot reach. If one is lucky or skilled enough to get at them despite it all, the prize tastes poor, and the effort and correlated smells are often committed to memory as being not quite worth it. The Scum Age came to an end by birthing the Worm Age, and was viscerally torn apart by its successor. The Worm Age comes to its end instead through notable evolutionary trends and newly emerging clades. From the hazy end of the Age of Worms forms the Age of the Fishes, the Piscean Age, an arms race of speed, evasion, and endurance observed by freshly sprouting eyes in this newly flourishing aquarium world. Thank you very much for watching. This project takes a lot of time, research, and thought, and I would love to hear what you think of the direction so far in the comments down below, as they say. Despite what episode 1 suggests, I no longer have a Patreon, but I do have Instagram. Whoa. I also do paleo art and comics if you want to see more from me, and if you haven't already, be sure to watch episodes 1 and 2 of this exobiology project. There's enough time in between entries in this series that any ideas you have could influence part 4 if you'd like to share them. Citations for images I used are in the description, as well as some further reading considering some of the topics I discussed in this video. The next video will mainly feature free swimming and eyed clades emerging in the Piscean Age. My throat kind of hurts, which is weird because I talk a lot in general, but I've been doing this for so long and I messed up so much. I was thinking this video would barely approach an hour, but my recording is around about 2 hours. That's wonderful. We're gonna get through this. Yeah, thank you again